It did get rained on or something. But I want to take a grinder and clean this sharp edge off. And any other sharp edges that are there. And what this does is that lip right there that you see that was welded on there, it's going to sit right on top of that. Get it go. It's got to go in there evenly, like a bearing almost. It either, there it went. Like I said, it's got to go in there square, just like a bearing. And the pins, I may have to take a file or another reamer drill. They go up inside like I showed earlier that I was drilling that hole. But that goes in there like that, and it's just a nice little bench, and it's real handy to just, when you're working, you can lay your grinder down on there. A couple little hand tools of any kind. It's going to be really handy. I've taken this piece out and flipped it, and I'm going to tack weld a reinforcing bar to the back side of it there before I start welding out the skip welds on that 1/2 inch by 1 inch bar. And then I have to add a second one bar in there, the reinforcing bar. I didn't have an 8-footer, and I want to weld it in real nicely, or tack weld it in there real nicely on one side all the way across. After tack welding that reinforcing bar in, I'm ready to skip weld on the piece that I want it to stay in there. Now I'm taking a soapstone to it and marking where I want to weld, and then skipping. I want to weld this on both sides now, but I'm going to skip weld it. That way it doesn't bow it. Finished welding, put about 3-inch welds with a 3-inch gap, and they're staggered one side to the other side. And I put this on to help strengthen it some more so it doesn't bow, and I put it back in there so it helps hold it too. We'll let this cool down till it's cold, and then I'm wanting to massage the back side and do some welding along here too, because this might rip. I'm not going to weld it solid, just tack it in spots. This might rip the weld off if it gets pulled too hard. To take this off, I'll grind this just a little bit on the tacks, and then I can hit it this way for the direction on the side of the weld, and it'll break those welds off, and these will come off. And then I'll take a grinder and clean it up, and show you what tools I'm going to put in it, and then sandblast it and paint it. If you notice, on one of the bars, the reinforcing bars, I tack welded it on the rearward side of that bench. And then the second bar I'm hitting right now, I tack welded it on the front side because I overlapped the two. That way it would come apart easier, and that's just the way I did it. And now I'll take the grinder and clean the area that the weld had been ripped. It was just a tack weld. I clean it up and buff it so that it's smooth, not noticeable. All these welds I made, even the tack welds, I use electrode 7018. Well, it's the next day, and I didn't even bother with it. I just let it sit there overnight, and it cooled down. So what I'm going to do now is pull it out and flip it around, put it back in place, and show you a few of the items that can be used, and talk about some other items that can be used. I don't have them made up yet, but they're ideas that anybody can use in the field. Later this year, into next year, you'll be able to see how I'm going to be using it. There is a project that I'm going to start working on, and you'll see it in the video of hanging the leads and using the truck bed. So this just pulls out. It's heavy. It is heavy. So that's 3/8 plate and some other pieces welded to it. I'd say it probably weighs over 100 pounds easily. Fits right up in there. Now, so I'm going to grab some of them other tools and show you how they go back in there. Alright, this is just a vise. That's, I call it like a mechanic's vise. It swivels. For now I want it tight so I can get a hold of it. And it's just a plate it's got to be heavy. You're going to be prying on it and twisting it. So this one ends up being 3/4 inch plate. And then it's got 1.5 inch square tubing, square stock, solid stock, welded to it. And I made it come out some. That way that this here is not over the top of this. It's out a ways a little bit in case there's pipe stands or any kind of skids that you're going to use. But it just slides right down in there. And then you can use it however you want to use it. It's a vise, and that will fit in that compartment up there. I can set it down in there. It's out of the way. This is what's considered as a pipe vise, not a mechanic's vise. And this here is just, I got a 1/4 inch plate. It's reinforced so that it won't bow. Now I have been thinking about doing the same thing I did there. I had that 3/4 inch plate where it's out just a little bit more, but it's bolted to that. You can buy these at Northern Tool or maybe Harbor Freight's got them too. And just set that in there, and then you can hook your pipe onto it. Now, there is something that this is nice to be able to use. There's a thing called a flange wheel. Now, there's two different ways of doing it. You put a piece of pipe in here that has a spindle on it. And that spindle, it don't have to be very big. It can be the smallest spindle for an axle. You know, 4 bolts, probably what the smallest you're going to find, 4 bolt pattern. And you would put that in here, and then you got your flange for the spindle with 4 bolts coming out of it. Now you might have to make an adapter plate. Those bolts go into that flange. And then there's what's called a chuck, a lathe chuck. And that adapter plate, not all chucks have bolts, patterns in the back for a bolt to go in them. But if you can find one that has, you can cinch it down on small stock, but yet you can get it to go out. It's going to be hard to get something over 10 inches out. That's probably about the biggest you're going to find on a small one. You can get a bigger one, but you'd bolt that adapter plate into that back side of that jaws of the lathe chuck. That's one way of doing it. And then that adapter plate, you want to make it larger so that you can grab a hold of it and spin it. Now it's going to spin off of that spindle, but you want it out there far enough where you can grab a hold of it and spin it. Whatever you're doing, cutting threads, or somebody's helping you, of course, or if you're welding, it makes it real nice. You can stand there and just spin it as you're welding. Those are two different ways, or one different way. The other way is you got your spindle and you've got a plate that's cut out so that it fits the flange, and you bolt the flange right up to it, and then you can just, when it's bolted up to it and you want to weld a short piece of pipe or whatever length of pipe to that flange, it's just so much quicker to do it that way and spin whatever the standards require, that, you know, do it in quarters and grind all your starts and stops. You want to follow your standards. And then I could have put what's called the Hoosier pole. I don't know where they got that name. I am from the Hoosier state, not knowing how it was spelled. So it grew later in the 1800s, and it stuck with everybody as Hoosier, Hoosier. Now, where the name for the pole came from, I don't know if it was another welder from Indiana, or maybe that person's last name was Hoosier. I'm not sure. If anybody in the comments can answer that, please do. It'd be interesting to know exactly what it is. We've also thought that it was Hoosier helper today, pulling leads. It could have been misinterpreted on how it should have been spelled, but you know, like Hoosier helper today, who's helping you pulling your leads. I'm not sure, but in the comments, if anybody can answer that, please do. But this is what I've came up with, and I'll show you right now how I hang my leads when I'm wanting to pull away and go forward. Now, I've had this on one other truck, and it was quite a bit longer, but this is what it has always been, and it was hooked up before on a bearing system, but I'm not going to worry about it. Now, couldn't you leave it like this? This has also got a bracket right here for another pole that comes out, and that usually would be for an umbrella. But it has a pin in it, and if you're welding and you're following the equipment, going backwards, you always want to stay on the inside. But if the equipment's on this side and you're following the equipment, I would spin it this way. And just hang it up on there. Now these little hooks right here are to hold the 7 or 9 inch grinder. And the leads would roll up here, and you'd bring them in from the cabinet up front and just bring them up here and just leave them loosely up here. And that's nice also. Got a little table here, throw the grinders up here, the welding rods are up here, and that's how I would do it.